time at this meeting, and I've never spoken at an online meeting before, so I'm really excited to be here. And thanks for that great introduction, Tamara. She did say that I've influenced her life, but she didn't say it was in a good way, in a positive way. So I'm hoping that it was a good thing, but I'm happy to be here. So we have a little tradition at my home group that I want to share with you guys, and that's to share 3 things that are important to my sobriety. The first is that I have a sobriety date, September 2nd, 1997. I know you guys are thinking, man, that guy looks really too young to have gotten sober that long ago, and it's really nice of you to think that. I appreciate that. And I, truthfully, I probably am too young to have gotten sober then. So I got sober in 97, September 2nd, 97, which was the day after my 18th birthday. And God willing, in this coming September, I'll have 20 years sober. So hopefully I don't drink in the next couple of months, and I'll have 2 decades, which is pretty freaking crazy. And the significance of that isn't lost on me. I mean, I've been sober at this point almost 2 years longer than I have not been sober, not even drank, but not been sober, not in Alcoholics Anonymous. And so I think, number one, that shows me that God works in my life, and he works all the time, regardless of whether I'm doing this thing perfectly, which I probably never have, or I'm not doing it hardly at all, which has definitely happened in my sobriety. It just kind of goes to show me that we get a pretty incredible gift, God's grace, and this gift of sobriety. So I'm really happy to experience this life sober. The second thing that I want to share with you guys is that I have a sponsor. His name is James. He doesn't know exactly where I am tonight. We played a little phone tag today. We were trying to talk, but we just never met up. So we'll probably hopefully talk tomorrow, and I'll get to tell him that this was either a great experience or terrible. Hopefully it's great for you guys. The third is that I have a home group, and it is the Evanston Group here in Evanston, Illinois, where I live. It's a great, solid group. If any of you are ever in town, besides you local guys, come to town and look up the Evanston Group. It's on Sunday night, 6 o'clock at St. Matthew's Church. And come and find me, and I'll try to make you feel welcome. So, I want to share with you really quickly what it was like for me, because I feel like, the promises are definitely paramount in my life today. And I want to share with you more than that, more about that than my drinking, because I feel like, we all have that drinking experience in common. We all know what it was like. But I want to share with you what the promises look like in my life today. So really quickly, I started drinking when I was 15 years old. I got sober when I was 18. So my drinking career was short-lived. It was a few years. I did the best I can to burn my life to the ground, and I came pretty close to doing a restaurant, washing dishes, and I got to know the kitchen staff, and we became friends. And, any of you that have worked in the restaurant industry before know that it's a pretty crazy crowd that works in restaurants. And so, I started drinking and smoking with these guys, and these guys were pretty hard partiers. I remember one day I looked over at the one of the line chefs, and he had his head stuck in the reach refrigerator, and he was doing bumps of meth right out of the reach-in fridge. It was a pretty crazy experience working there. It was always a party. So that's really, for me, how I got my start. And, I became friends with one of the guys that I worked with, who was a little bit older than me. And he had his own place, and he gave me a key to his apartment, and I could go over there and party pretty much whenever I wanted to, and I did. Kind of fast forward a little bit, that kind of led me pretty quickly to a place where I was just kind of stealing and drinking and smoking as much as I could, as often as I could. And I ended up getting busted for theft. At that point, I'd gotten fired from that restaurant job, and got a new job at this movie theater, and I ended up stealing this TV VCR combo. Some of you guys are probably like, what's a VCR? You don't even know what that is anymore. But it was this like combo TV VCR thing. It was really high tech at the time. But I stole this thing and took it out to my car, and I eventually not only am I a thief, but I like to brag about the things that I steal. And I eventually told the wrong person. Got back to my then former employers at the movie theater, because I had at that point gotten fired from that job too. And the cops had tracked me down, and I ended up getting a call from this one police officer one day after I got home from high school, and he asked me if I had this TV. I figured, if there's a cop calling me, I had gotten caught red-handed, and so I copped to it, and he was like, all right, here's what we're going to do. Because you're cooperating, I'm going to need you to bring the TV down to the station. We're going to book you because we have to. That's procedure. But because you're cooperating, I'm going to try to get the people pressing charges to go easy on you. Needless to say, they didn't go easy on me, and a few-month court process followed that. I ended up being charged with a C-class felony, which in Missouri, I got sober in St. Louis. And sorry about that. They're not coming for me, thankfully. I ended up getting charged with a C-class felony, which in Missouri was the third worst felony charge. And my lawyer ended up, thank God for lawyers. God, I love lawyers. They ended up getting it knocked down to a misdemeanor, 120 hours community service, and 2 years probation. And so, I was 17 at the time, and I knew that I got caught with anything. I'm still a minor. If I got caught with anything, drugs or alcohol, much less anything worse than that, then I'd probably have to go do some time. And as much as I hated myself at the time, I didn't want to go to jail. I like to think I'm a little too pretty for that. So glad you guys laughed at that. So I swore to myself that I wouldn't drop or smoke anything, and that I promised that I picked up again and was back at, and my 18th birthday, hanging out with. At the time, we decided we're going to go out to this country western nightclub called In Cahoots. And to be honest with you, I really have no idea why I went out there, because I hate nightclubs and I hate country music even more. But that's where they said that they were going to go, so I was going along with them. And the thing I remember most, more than anything else about that night, is this overwhelming, unbelievable craving to just get as messed up as I possibly could. And for me, that's really what my drinking and using had come down to at that point, was I just get as roasted as I could, as often as I could. And I wasn't even trying to hide it much at that point. So so they go out there and they go off and they go dance and they're dancing and chasing girls and doing their thing. And I just want to get baked. And I turned to this guy that I'd met that night, who was sitting with me still, and I asked him if he wanted to smoke up with me. And he said, sure. So I broke out my dugout and my one hitter, and I lit up and passed it to him. And, I don't know if you guys know this or not, but weed has this smell to it, right? And so this big cloud of smoke just kind of wafted down to the security guards, the off-duty cops that were there that night, and they came down and patted me down, found my stuff. And so there I am getting busted again. They held me until the real cops got there and put me in cuffs. And I'm sitting in the lobby of this club. Everybody who's coming in for the night, they're seeing me in cuffs sitting in the lobby. And, I guess the cops were trying to humiliate me, which at that point really didn't work very well, because I was so miserable. Just it didn't have any effect. But, I don't know how to explain it other than, at that point in my drinking, everything had culminated to the point where I was really just done. All of us get to that point in our drinking, and some of us even get there multiple times. I like to remember what I heard a speaker say in a meeting one time. We as alcoholics, we have these blinders on. And, at certain points in our drinking careers, the blinders just kind of shift to the point where we can get a little bit better understanding or a fuller scope of the devastation that our drinking creates around us. And for me, I think that was really the first time in my life when I got those blinders shifted and I got a full scope of the devastation. And I was just done. I was miserable. I wanted to die. And, an experience like that when you're out with friends, that tends to put a cap on the evening. So we all piled back in the car that we came in. And we drove home, and they dropped me off first. I went into my mom's house where I was living at the time. Walked in, and I figured there was no way around telling her that I got busted again. I'd probably have to get a lawyer again at the very least. And so I went to her bedroom door. She was getting ready for bed, and I knocked on her door and asked if we could talk. And I should mention that my mom at this point had been sober in Alcoholics Anonymous for 7 years. And so she came out into the kitchen, and I'm sitting on this step in between the dining room and our kitchen. And, we talked that night for about an hour and a half. First 15 minutes was about me getting arrested, and staring down at my feet after that 15 minutes, just staring at the floor. I asked her if she ever felt like she wanted to die. Because like I said, that's for me what it had come down to at that point. And she looked at me, and she looked me dead in the eye, and she said, "Not anymore." And I just started bawling because I had nothing left. And she came over and sat next to me, gave me a hug, and patted me on the back like moms tend to do. But instead of letting me off the hook that night, she asked me if I wanted to go to an AA meeting with her the next day, and I said sure. And so I met her down at this place that's still around in St. Louis called the Limbo Club. It's a great place for a meeting if you're ever in the area. Met her down there for the noon meeting, and that was my first meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. Now, to be completely honest with you guys, I had no intention of getting sober. I didn't want to stop drinking. And so by the letter of the third tradition, I really was not a member of Alcoholics Anonymous because I didn't have that desire. But I was there. I was willing to try something different at the very least. And my sponsee just texted me and he said, "Bring your own wig to work day." And he posted this crazy picture of him in this ridiculous wig. Anyway, a little off track there. I'm sitting in this meeting, and the only thing I really remember from this meeting is staring at the front of the room with the big blue and red and white board with the steps and traditions on it. I remember I remember chain smoking, my palms were sweating, and I remember wondering why everybody was staring at me. And, I find out later that nobody was staring at me. I'm just a paranoid alcoholic. But I ended up talking to a few people after that meeting. And, by God's grace and God's grace alone, I came back the next day to that same new meeting on a Tuesday. And that's really how I started in sobriety. Now, I wish that I could tell you that that was the end of my insanity, and it was a happy ending from then on. But that's really not the case because, like I said, I had no intention of stopping drinking, and I really believe that I was given the gift of sobriety because I hadn't had a drink since that day. But that's not to say that there wasn't a ton of powerlessness and unmanageability left in my life. And I ended up getting this guy as my sponsor who, God bless him, did the best he could to drag me through the steps. But, I really wasn't having any of it. And about a month of me being sober and trying to work with this guy, I ended up hooking up with his girlfriend, which I don't suggest if you're new in AA. It doesn't tend to work out too well. So there I am, sober in AA, and I have no solution to what's wrong with me being alcoholism, right? Obviously, I'm not drinking. That was removed from me my first day. And, obviously, I don't have a spiritual solution. I'm not being honest with my sponsor for very good reasons. He's not taking me through the steps. And, I really wanted to have nothing to do with this God thing you guys kept talking about. And so at about 3 months sober, I was left at that place where I was when I walked into Alcoholics Anonymous, and that's that place that I wanted to die. And I think it was an even more desperate condition for me at that point in time because I didn't have a drink and I wasn't about to drink. So I was left with my own insane mind, and that was really it. With really only taking my own life as the only solution. And, the funny thing about that is that, when we're in that spot, when we really are desperate and willing, as only the dying can be, as we like to say in AA, God has a funny way of putting people in our lives that tend to be able to make a difference. And I remember the day I had 3 months sober, I was sitting at this other Alano club by myself, right? It's a young people's meeting. It's a Saturday night. It's 8 o'clock. And it was a big meeting. I mean, pretty big, at least for the area. It was about 30, 40 people, and they were all up having a great time, enjoying life and being sober. And I'm sitting at this table all by myself, just sulking in my own feeling of wanting to die. And the way that I'm sitting, I can see the front door of this place, and the guy that walks through the front door when I'm looking up looks directly at me, makes a beeline for me, sticks out his hand, introduces himself, says, "My name's Mark. Can I sit down with you?" And, I'm 3 months sober. I'm on the verge of death, but I can always entertain company, right? So I say sure. And he sits down across the table from me, and the first words out of his mouth were, "Why do you think you're an alcoholic?" And what's rolling through my mind is, I'm 3 months sober. I feel like ass. Why don't you just get off my back? But what comes out of my mouth is the truth, and the truth was, I don't know. And he explained to me straight out of the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous that alcoholism is a threefold disease, and that for people like us, if we work on the spiritual aspect of this disease, then the mental and the physical will fall in line. And maybe not only do we not have to drink again, but maybe we can have some semblance of a happy, normal life. And I really had no idea what this guy was talking about, but the sense that I got from him was that he knew what he was talking about. And I really believe that God put Mark in my life that night to save my life. I ended up asking him to be my sponsor about a month later. And I'd meet up with him once a week, and we'd go through the big book and get into the steps. And that's really why I'm still sober today. So that's really the foundation of my sobriety today. And, there's been some tough times along the way. There's been some amazing times along the way. But I've really literally gotten to grow up in Alcoholics Anonymous. And, what my life looks like today, and some of the benefit of living a sober life and doing it to the best of my ability in the principles of Alcoholics Anonymous. I moved up to Chicago at 5 years sober. I was about 22 at the time, and I moved up here because I got the chance to go to college. And I ended up going to a school up here who gave me a boatload of cash to come here. And I graduated. And, for this guy, I stood on the stage at my high school graduation, not knowing if there was going to be a diploma in the envelope. And to be able to say that I graduated from college and then I went back and got a master's degree is a pretty astounding accomplishment for just a burnout drunk. Along the way, into a year of me living in the Chicago area, I met a girl. And we dated for 4 years, and we ended up getting married. And I don't know about you guys, but for me, I'm a 9-month kind of guy. Like job or girlfriend at 9 months, I'm either getting fired or quitting the job, or she's breaking up with me, or I'm breaking up with her. But one way or the other, 9 months is my limit. That's the most I can manage. And I've been married to this woman for 9 years now. It's 9 years. And I guess that means we've been together for about 13, which is pretty incredible. We have 4 amazing kids. I inherited a stepdaughter when we got married. And we're about to, at the end of August, we're about to take her up to college. She's going to school in Minneapolis. And to be able to watch this girl grow up and become the woman that she is today, it's a real gift. I mean, she's grown up the exact same way that I grew up. Alcoholic parents, had a lot of family around her to help her grow up and a lot of support. And she's turned out to be a pretty phenomenal human being, which I'm really grateful for. And she gets to go to school in a kind of similar pretense that I did, that, she got the presidential scholar for the school that she's going to, and basically takes care of half her tuition, which, when she got accepted in the school letter, and she's reading the letter to us, and she's like, congratulations, you got in. And Colleen, my wife, her mom, starts crying. And then she goes to the next letter, and it says, congratulations, you've been awarded the presidential scholarship. It's $60,000 over the 4 years you're here. And I start crying. And so it's a pretty phenomenal thing to be able to experience that and watch her experience that, walk through it. And, it's just a gift. We have 3 boys together that I get to be a dad to, show up every day, get the experience of showing up in their lives. And, just a kind of a quick experience that I'll tell you guys what it's like for me to be a dad, a sober dad, and try to live these principles in raising these kids. A few years back, my oldest son, Julian, we signed him up for T-ball. And so that particular night he had practice and I wasn't feeling well. And so I called one of the other dads who has a kid on the team to come and pick him up and see if he would take him to practice. And he did. And so me and my sons have a tradition on Friday nights. We call it our dude party. And we just, we cook some frozen pizzas and make milkshakes. And we just throw down on some pizza, and it's a pretty good time. But he had to go that night. So it's me and my 2 little sons, and we're eating this pizza, and I stick a little bit to the side for him so he has some to eat when he gets home. And I put the little guys in bed, and he gets home, and it's just me and him sitting there at the dining room table, and I put this big giant plate of pizza in front of him. And he's starving, and he's just throwing down this pizza down his throat. And I'm asking him how practice was and if he had a good time, and he's telling me all about it. And, the conversation kind of dies down, and there's this little pause, and, it's probably about a 10-second pregnant pause. And I just, at the time, I'm looking at this kid, this little 8-year-old kid at the time, and my whole just inside, I get filled up with this this overwhelming love for this little person, and that I get to be a dad to this kid. And as I'm sitting there looking at him, this feeling is growing and getting more intense, and it gets so intense that I start laughing. And he's looking at me, and he sees me, and he starts laughing. And we're just sitting there, the two of us. We didn't say a word, and we're just sitting at the dining room table, the two of us laughing. The more we sit there and laugh, the harder we laugh. And it gets to the point where he's laughing so hard that I'm afraid he's going to choke on his pizza, right? And eventually the laughing dies down, and it gets quiet again, and there's this other pause. And he looks at me, and he says, "Dad, that was really weird." And I'm like, "Yeah, Julia, that was pretty weird," and because he has no context for what that really means. But I do, and we do. And for me, that's what I look at as God being involved in my relationship with my kids, is I get moments like that where I become overwhelmed with love. And I look to that experience, and I think that that's what God is for me. His relationship with me is that he loves me like that. He's just so overwhelmed with love for me that no matter what I do, sober or drunk, no matter what kind of mistakes I make in this sober life, that I get the opportunity to live and it be an expression of him in this world and try to help people as best I can. And I really believe that at our best in Alcoholics Anonymous, that we are we reach the pinnacle of service in the 12th step when we are sitting across the table with another alcoholic. And I believe that I'm at my best when I'm sitting across the table with a sponsee, elbows deep in the big book, talking about the steps and sharing my experience about what it was like for me drinking and what it's like for me today sober, And the guy that walked into Alcoholics Anonymous just desperate and dying and powerless to do anything about my situation and just feeling completely hopeless, I've experienced a psychic change, and I've become a completely different person. And, the amazing thing and one of the greatest experiences I've ever had in life is to be able to share that with another person and to watch them have a psychic change, and for them to experience the gift of Alcoholics Anonymous and have a sober life, and to be able to pass that on to other people. And that's really what you guys have given me. So I'm really grateful to be here. I'm really grateful that Tamara asked me to speak. Thanks so much, guys. And I'm really excited to hear what you have to say. Thanks for having me tonight.